for the last 43 years as a wildlife veterinarian. And at the second half of the presentation, Lauren's going to talk about the trip we went to Namibia in 2019. Lauren's in the Caribbean. It's 10 o'clock at night. So Lauren, stay awake. Okay, we'll get to you pretty soon.
On it.
Okay, great. Okay, let's go to do this. Got it. All right. There we go. So my wildlife career working with wild birds started in Rochester, Michigan in 1978. My staff currently thinks it's a funny picture and they make a joke and say you look like John Travolta in this picture. I started with owls back then, and then in 1980, I moved to California and I started working at the Sunsurf Animal Hospital in Sunset Beach. This is me with my partner, Joel Pasco. We're only 5 minutes from Bolsa Chica Conservancy, so we saw a lot of wildlife, especially birds like pelicans. They came in for various injuries. So at that time, I became an expert at fixing broken bones and taking fish hooks out of all type of wildlife. Fish hooks are a common problem in this area, as you can see here, in the mouth and the wings, and even sometimes they swallowed it, the head's this direction, and the line's going all the way down to the back legs. So fish hooks are a big problem in this beach area with the pelicans. If anybody remembers, around that time in the mid 80s or so, there was somebody in Dana Point was cutting off the tops of beaks of pelicans. Kind of hard to remember back that far, but we were part of the team out in prosthetic beaks on them to see if it helped them be able to dive naturally. And in 1989, I purchased the Long Beach Animal Hospital. Here's my partner, Dr. Bill Ridgway, examining a peregrine falcon, which we get them not uncommonly because there's many in downtown Long Beach. And many times when they come in, it's due to trauma like this peregrine has right here too. So we put them back together and off they go back into downtown Long Beach. We see a lot of different things over the years. I can barely scratch the surface of over 43 years of taking care of avian wildlife. Little chicks like this, the broken what's called tibiotarsal bone or shin bone. Kestrels coming in with tar and glue on them, having to get that off of them. We do acupuncture in ducks sometimes when they come in with certain lamenesses and neurologic problems. Whenever we get wildlife brought to us, we do a big effort to try and get them back into where they're found. So here's Alex climbing to put the hawk back in the tree where it was found when it was first injured. We see all kinds of interesting things that come to anatomy. So this is a barn owl. Has anybody ever seen the ears of a bird, especially a barn owl? And this is how they're able to find their prey. Well, they have very sensitive hearing with these fibroid coming over here to make it easier to hear things at night. In the springtime, we get overloaded with chicks, especially chicks and squirrels. So we try to get the word out to everybody. We take care of only injured wildlife. And sometimes it's frustrating because people drive a big distance to come to our hospital thinking that we're going to feed these baby birds the rest of their lives. So on our Facebook page, we have information on that. But honestly, when these little guys come in, they are so cute, they're hard to resist. This is a little Hummer. You can see how hungry he is. Watch him. So they like little machine guns. And I'm going to give you another video here where you can see a little close up of his tongue. His tongue goes 100 miles an hour. So even though we don't want to see them as birds like that, we do like when they come in. So on our Facebook page, we have a little monograph. Tell people what to do if you find a baby bird. So if you get a chance, link on the Facebook page and show those other people. So in the springtime, we don't have them bring in baby birds unnecessarily. They should have kept with their parents in the ground. We do a lot of teaching. We have a program called the Externship Program where we teach senior veterinary students how to work on all kinds of animals, including wildlife. This is Dr. Lisa Swan working on a red-tailed hawk. She's from UC Davis. This is Megan from Illinois working on a cormorant. This is Ellie working on a great horned owl. And you're going to see a surgery on this owl later in my presentation on an eye problem that it had. And this is Elizabeth working with some ducks. And these students are fantastic. They're just wonderful at what they do. And Lauren, you're going to be part of this program, aren't you? So I'm going to show you what Elizabeth does here, working on a duck for some rehab.
One of the first things I do is have him stand up tall on both of his feet. That helps him get his own neck extended a little.
That was a duck that had a neck injury and started part of our treatment. She was doing some rehab therapy for it. On occasion, my staff brings me some funny things. Okay, and one day they said, "We have a butterfly for you back there." Well, what do you mean? It's a butterfly with a bum wing. And sure enough, somebody found a butterfly with a tattered wing. Well, there's no book we go to figure out what to do about this. So I decided to use some tissue glue from surgery. We put the wing back together, gave it some high octane, filled up its tank a little bit, did a couple little test flights with my finger, and off it went. So apparently it turned out okay. So we do get some funny things sometimes in our program. All right, let's go over a couple of cases now. One's going to be a barn owl, one's going to be a red-tailed hawk with the fracture, and one's going to be the owl with the eye surgery. So a couple of years ago, a barn owl was found hanging from an overpass in Long Beach. The lifeguards came and cut it down, and they brought it to Long Beach Animal Hospital for care. So we're going to have a little video of this from the TV.
Lifeguards, they were reaching and using an inflatable boat. They were able to cut the line and catch it in a net. The owl was released to Long Beach Animal Hospital.
So it's brought to us, and you're going to see in this case what we did with it. Part of the work we do is we use some of the work with South Bay Wildlife Rescue, but these are the three ladies involved with it. So when everything was done, the bird was released, I had them do a little fun interview. This is Victoria from Long Beach Animal Control, Dr. Wood that works for me, and Christina from South Bay. And you can see as she's talking, she's very nervous, but let's give them credit for the work that they did.
My name is Officer Cunningham with Long Beach Animal Care Services. We received a call about a bird hanging from a bridge underneath 2nd Street and Studebaker. When I arrived, I did see a owl hanging from its wing, hanging from some fishing line. I immediately called lifeguards who were able to get a small boat out into the water due to the water dropping. And we were able to do a 1, 2, 3 and hurry up and get the bird onto dry land and to carry it out to Long Beach Animal Hospital.
I'm Dr. Liz Wood from Long Beach Animal Hospital, and when we received the owl, we first noticed that one of the wings was drooping away from the body, and it still had remaining fishing line in the ends of the feathers. So we cut that away and took radiographs and found that there were no fractures of the wing. There was significant soft tissue swelling and a soft tissue injury from the weight of the bird hanging from the wing, but no fractured bones. So we treated it by wrapping the wing and also giving it pain and anti-inflammatory medication and antibiotics, and kept the wrap on until the wing was no longer drooping from the side of the body, and then transferred it to South Bay Wildlife Rehab.
So everything we do is a team effort. If it wasn't for the rehabbers, we wouldn't be able to achieve half the things that we do. So let's look at that bird now. This is the barn owl. You can see he's got a drooping wing there. Luckily, there was no fractures. So here's the radiograph of this bird. It's laying on his back. The R marker means this is the right side. And if you look at the bones over here, you can see the darkness in here and the darkness in here. These are hollow bones. It's part of their respiratory apparatus, and it also makes them light so they can fly. So the barn owl had no fractures. So we put on a special wing wrap that we do for the birds like this. And then about a month later, after the rehab, we released it where we found it. Christina got to release the bird because she did a lot of work on this. There it goes flying off. And it flew right to the area where it came from, a palm tree over there. So we'll show that to you in slow motion. So it's nice to see a successful case like this happen, because not all of them are going to be successful. When it comes to injured wildlife, our success ratio is probably about 50% as opposed to the dogs and cats and domestic animals, where our success ratio is probably 90-95%. So we're going to have a few graphic photos, not too bad. There's not too much blood and guts, but I'll give you a warning, you're going to see some surgery photos coming up. So this is a common problem we have. So we're going to show you how we take out a little fish hook. This is in the esophagus of a bird. I think this is a cormorant. And there it is. So let's look at our anatomy here. This is the windpipe or the trachea. So the bird's head is this way, body's coming down this way, and this is the esophagus. And you can see what it's like to pull a fish hook out of an esophagus. We don't really want to make a big incision in the esophagus because it will scar easily. It could stricture, so we want to use as little trauma as possible. So fish hooks are a common problem. We see them probably weekly at the Long Beach Animal Hospital. This is a fun little case. This is a semi-tame duck that was at a little pond, and it came in because it had a severely broken right wing. You can see how bad it is. This is not repairable. It cannot be fixed. So we know some people that wanted to adopt the duck, so we went ahead and did an amputation on it. You're going to see little photos from that. Good timing on this one because we had a student working with us, and here she is learning how to examine a duck prior to anesthesia. She's learning about pre-anesthetic medication we give the duck. You can see how tame this duck is, just sitting there. They love the attention. Then we mask it down. We showed her how to intubate it. And then I taught her how to do the surgery with laser. We're not going to show that, not enough time tonight, but she got a chance to see how the laser is dramatically better at controlling pain, swelling, and inflammation postoperatively. Here's the bird afterwards, just after surgery. And this little duck had a personality. A couple of days later, it was in its water, bathing, getting ready to be taken to a new home. And I think you can see it's a good bit happier than when it came in with a badly broken wing. That was quite painful. So the duck had a couple of days swimming with us, making sure it's okay. And then we went ahead and we sent it off to somebody. That picture will show up. There we go. And here is the person taking it to the person who adopted the duck. So that turned out to be a fun case, a good case. Okay, let's talk about a little more involved case. The Long Beach Animal Control brought in a red-tailed hawk that was at Long Beach Airport. They didn't know what's wrong with it. They brought it in. Here's the bird resting before we got a chance to analyze it. Okay, it was banded. The band says 1967. So we went on the USGS website. Here's Jonathan doing that. And you can see he puts in on the USGS website the band number, and we give them the disposition of the bird. So it's a wonderful program where everybody can monitor what's going on with banded birds. Jonathan is taking care of the bird now. So we radiographed it. Now I want you to see three things on this radiograph. This is the right wing. So first off, it was shot 3 times with BBs, but more importantly, it's got a fracture. It's a fracture on its upper arm bone. It's our humerus. So this is called a midshaft spiral fracture of the humerus. So we're going to talk about this a little bit because I want you to understand the anatomy before surgery. This part of the fracture is called the proximal segment. It's toward the body of the head. This part of the fracture is called the distal segment. We're going to go ahead and as part of our procedure, we're going to insert a pin. It's called an IM or intermedullary pin up there through the shoulder, bring it back down, align the bones and bring it back down to the elbow. So we're going to show you that surgery in a second. So here's our bird getting prepped. So once we found that it's got a broken wing like that, that is very painful. Those raw ends of the bone are very painful. So the first thing we do besides putting it on pain medication is to give it a special wrap that makes it feel much more comfortable. And then after it's stabilized, we spend a day or two giving it pain medicines, anti-inflammatories, making sure it's eating, giving it good nutrition, and get it stronger for surgery. And here's the day of surgery, being masked down, ready for the anesthesia, okay, being intubated. That's my hands right here teaching someone how to intubate a bird. And once they put it in, here I am making sure it's in the right pipe, making sure it's in the trachea and not the esophagus. Now, this is the actual wound itself once we've plucked the feathers away. And this is a good teaching tool for the students because if this was a person or a dog or a cat, you might say it's gangrene, you have to amputate it. And a bird, this is normal. So you can do the surgery without any worries about it. So here's our patient getting prepped in surgery. One of the doctors, part of the surgeon, Dr. Kennedy's there. And then here's Dr. Wood draping, Brianna making sure anesthesia is stable. The 2 doctors working together. It's hard to fix broken bones. It's very delicate and they're pretty intricate. So it takes 2 people to do the surgery. Let's review the anatomy again. Remember, this is the proximal segment. This is the distal segment. In the next photo, you're going to see this piece of bone sticking out. And that is this piece of bone right here. Let's go back and show you again. You're seeing it stick out. It's the bone that goes towards the elbow. And so here it is. This is it. And it's going towards the elbow. The other piece of bone is under this muscle here too. So we have to dissect it out gently because there's nerves, blood vessels, tendons, and ligaments. You've got to be very careful. And now we have it out. So now you've got the proximal segment going towards the shoulder. And then we also have the distal segment going towards the elbow. Now we have to put the 2 together. But before we do that, we have to put a pin up the shaft of the proximal segment coming out the shoulder. Here's that pin coming out the shoulder. We pull it all the way up. Then we go right back down, retrograde, and we come on back down. And we pull it back so it's not exposed. Then we spend about 15 minutes slowly breaking down the muscles so the 2 ends can come together because in the surgery, when the bone is broken, the ends overlap a lot because the muscles are very strong. And you can see there's a large muscle belly there too. So a large part of the surgery is fatiguing the muscles so we can line up these 2 segments of bone. Here they are lined up, but it's not enough. There's not enough stability for this. So we have to go ahead and put some wires around the bone. So here's the shoulder. The pin is all the way down to the elbow. You can't see it, but it's down to the elbow. So we put on what are called cerclage wires. We put on 2. We're happy that it was strong enough, so we put on a 3rd one. You can see the doctor tightening it right now. So there we are just before closing it up. And we're going to take all this tissue here, the soft tissue, this muscle, tendons, and ligaments, and we're going to cover all this completely. And here's our patient after the surgery. So here's where the fracture site is. This is the elbow, so this pin is all the way down. But we don't know how far it is because we can't see down the bone. So before we wake it up from anesthesia, we take a radiograph. When we got lucky, we did good. Here's the shoulder, the pin's coming down all the way perfectly. This is the distal cortex of the humerus. We don't want to touch that because it's thin. So this pin is seated perfectly. And you can see the 3 cerclage wires You can also see the cortex of the bone is lined up pretty good. So we're very happy with this. At that point in time, then we cut the pin with the bolt cutters because it's a really powerful pin. It's really strong, and we need powerful bolt cutters to cut it. There it is sticking out. And then we make sure the area is completely dry because we can set up for moist dermatitis, fungal infections. So we dry it completely while it's still under anesthesia. Then we use something called bone wax to cover the bone end sticking out where the pin is sticking out. Put a bandage on there, put on a special wrap, keep it under anesthesia, and we're sure the wrap is okay and it can breathe okay. And then we sit there and we take it off the anesthesia, but we don't let it wake up because if we bring it right into recovery, it'll thrash while it's waking up. So what we do is we keep it wrapped in a towel with 100% oxygen. Then when it's fully awake, we let it go and then it can perch very well. So here's our patient the next day as we're checking the incision site. The area where the pin's coming out, where the bone wax was, is perfect. There's no inflammation there, so we're happy with that. Here's where the incision was, and we see no inflammation, no infection there. So we're very happy with how the surgery went and how it's healing. A day or two later, the bird came down to be taken over to South Bay Wildlife Rescue. Spent about a month there, came back in for post-surgical x-rays, and everything's looking good. You can see how the pin is migrated a little bit, but very, very minimal. Not even something to worry about. And you can see how the wires are holding good. And you can also see this bony protuberance here, and a little bit here, that's called callus. That means there's good healing going on with the bone. So we're happy with the progress. Back to South Bay for more rehab and more work. And then finally, coming in about a month or two later to be checked, and it's time to take the pin out. So we put the chuck on there too. And we're going to show you a fun video of taking the pin out. And you're going to see how Dr. Wood is kind of enthusiastic about her work, to put it mildly.
You ready?
Notice how she rotates when she takes the pin out. We don't pull it, we rotate everything. Putting it in and taking it out, a lot of rotation. So as you can see, she's a happy camper on this one. Okay, it was one of her first big surgeries and it worked out very, very well. But we're not done. This bird now has to go to rehab for more time. We got to make sure the bone's doing okay. And so we got to check range of motion. Here it is on a recheck down the road. And then about another month after that, we checked it and everything was doing good. The pin's out now. You can see there's nice callus formation. Our 3 cerclage wires are holding just fine. So this bird is getting ready to be released. So here it is now with the pin out. It's about a month later. Ann Lynch called me and said, the bird's doing great, but we can't release it. She goes, it's just not strong enough to fly. It's not going to work. We're going to keep it for a teaching bird. I said, great, it's worth the problem. She called me 2 weeks later and said, time to release it. The bird's doing great. So I went and picked it up, brought it up to Northern California because the FAA, when you find a bird in an airport, wants you to release it at least 150 miles away. So hurry up in Northern California. And we got a chance to release the bird right there. And here's a slow motion of the release of this bird. And there it goes. So it was a successful team effort from Long Beach Animal Control bringing it in, to my team doing the medical care, to the significant work that South Bay does on the rehab work, and then me coming back into the picture, bringing it up to Northern California. So we're happy to see cases like this. It makes it all worthwhile in the work that we do. Okay, we got one more case before Lauren starts. It's going to be a little more sophisticated now. We had an owl that came in with an eye injury, and I need to give you some anatomy before you understand what we did. So this is a cadaver eye. This is an eye that is not alive. So it's looking this way. You can see the cornea, and you can see the fluid in front of the part of the iris called the anterior chamber. And we got the pupil in the iris, the part that makes the color of your eye. And then we have the lens. So lens has got 2 parts. The lens part itself with a capsule around the lens. A normal lens is perfectly clear. This lens here is cloudy because it's not a live specimen. In the surgery we do, you're going to see a cloudy lens. And you're going to hear Dr. Essen, the ophthalmologist, say that the word cataract when describing the lens. It's not a cataract like you're used to with the person that can't see well. It just means that the lens is inflamed and cloudy. And what happened is the bird was traumatized. The lens, the normal clear lens, was ruptured through its own membrane into the anterior chamber. When it passed this membrane and the lens touched this fluid, it became inflamed, and that caused a cataract. The inflammation causes pain. It can cause glaucoma and even loss of the eye. So we have to go in and take this out. Continue on with their anatomy. The back of the eye is called the vitreous, and here is the retina with the optic nerve. Now, when I was in Africa recently, we drove around at night with the spotlight to look at the animals, and the animals like the lions and the impalas have light that reflects. As humans, we don't have that, and that's because there is a lucent layer over here called the tapetum lucidum that takes the light from animals, brings it to the retina, and magnifies it for more vision. That's why animals like lions can see at night much better than we can. So what Dr. Essen's going to be doing, you're going to hear about this and see it in a second. He's going to make an incision at the limbus where the cornea and sclera meet. He's going to go ahead and he's going to make the incision right here, and this fluid is going to flow out. You can't see it, but it flows out. He can't do the surgery if it flows out. So he's going to put in something called viscoelastic to keep the integrity here. He's going to insert something called a phacoemulsifier. He's going to, through ultrasound, break up the cataract, he calls it. You think of it as an inflamed cloudy lens, okay? He's going to suck it out. Then when he's done, he sews everything back together. So let's get started on that surgery. So here's our patient. It's a great horned owl. You can see the lens. It's luxated as from the chair where it's supposed to be into the front interior chamber. The other eye of the same bird, seeing what's normal, a perfect clear lens. Okay, we check for glaucoma with a special instrument. Checking the other eye, this membrane came out that birds have that we don't have as people. It's commonly called the third eye. The proper name is the nictitating membrane. So once we got that out of the way, we checked this eye and you see how big their eyes are and how clear the cornea is. So then we did some radiographs to make sure there's no bony injury, which there wasn't. And then we took it to Dr. Essen for the surgery. He's going to talk about the surgery.
I'm Doug Essen. I'm the veterinary ophthalmologist with VOC, Vet Ophthalmic Consulting, here in Irvine, California. And we just removed a cataract from the right eye of a great horned owl. The cataract was there, we think, because of an injury. The capsule which surrounds the lens was no longer intact. And without removal, the likelihood is that that cataract would have created chronic inflammation, significant problems, and maybe even glaucoma, as well as loss of vision, pain, even complications potentially leading to the loss of the eye. The surgery involved, first off, anesthetizing the owl, which is no small undertaking. We have some exotic specialists with us today who are very comfortable anesthetizing birds. After positioning, we used operating microscopy, just as a human surgeon would do, to be able to see things in very close-up detail. We opened up the eye, maintained the space in the eye with a special jelly material called viscoelastic, opened up the capsule on the surface of the lens, and then used a human phacoemulsifier to remove the cataract material. And a phacoemulsifier is an interesting little thing. It's a combination of ultrasound, which breaks up the cataract, and vacuum, which sucks the cataract out. After we were done with that, we closed up the incision and put a little anti-inflammatory medicine in the eye to keep it comfortable and free from inflammation in the healing process. In terms of prognosis, we hope this owl is going to do well. The lens has been removed. We, of course, haven't put a new lens in because nobody makes commercial lenses for owls just yet. But the other eye is functioning very well. This eye should be visual, even though it won't have the same visual acuity that it would have had with a natural lens. We've removed the cataract, though, so it's functional. And we've also controlled the inflammation by removing the cataract. So the plan is functional vision from this eye and hopefully release and return to the wild for this animal.
So we're lucky here in Southern California to have the expertise of people like this because he's interested in wildlife. He does us a lot of big favors when he does things like this. And he knows what he's doing. So here's Ellie, the vet student, doing her job of setting up my tripod before the surgery. And here we are prepping our patient. Last minute preparation, intubated. Okay, intubated, ready to go. You can see the gas anesthesia coming through the endotracheal tube. You see the bright light from his microscopy setup where he's going to look at do the surgery. A lot of special instruments have to be set up. Here's some of those instruments he uses for the surgery. Okay, him setting up for the surgery. Dr. Essen getting positioned in the right way to be he wants to be for the procedure. And the whole procedure is done through this through this microscope. Now here's the setup. That's Ellie watching the surgery. Dr. Essen doing the surgery. He's got a teaching microscope, so any one of us can look anytime we want with Dr. Wood checking on what he's doing right now. And here's how I did the footage you're going to see here in a second. So here we are setting up to move the eyelids out of the way. It's a very bright light that's on there so you can see everything. So now you can see this little instrument here that moves the eyelids out of the way, and he's making the incision at the limbus where the cornea and sclera come together. He's opening up it a little bit bigger so he can put in his unit for the phaco emulsifier. Here he is putting in that viscoelastic to keep this intact, because when he made that incision, fluid came out of the eye. You can see the cornea, you can see the lens down there. And then here's the instrument he uses to go ahead and break it up with ultrasound and suck it out. And then here he is putting it in that opening, and he's going to do that in a second on this little video. So I'm going to show you the video here. Let me get the sound down a little bit. And there we go. So that's the beginning part, about 5 minutes of him gently changing settings on the unit and doing different things to get it all sucked out of there. And then when he's got it all sucked out, he makes sutures, 8-aught suture material where he made the incision, which is mean you have to have that microscope to see that. And then he injects some cortisone, some anti-inflammatory into the conjunctiva to minimize inflammation and make it less painful after surgery. And you can see where he put his sutures right here. This is 8-aught suture material. Here's our patient after surgery. We're happy everything went okay. That's Ellie, Dr. Wood, and myself. Loading into my car, off to Long Beach Animal Hospital. A few drops of medication, and the bird did much better. But unfortunately, he didn't make it. He died about a week or so after this. So well worth it though, but we gave it a try. Okay, that ends my part of the presentation. Now it's Lauren, she's up. This is her in Zambia with me in 2019, chilling on the Zambezi River. She's a true birder, spent all her time looking at little tweety birds with her binoculars as best she could, okay? Learn how to photograph a little bit, and also learn when it comes to photography, taking photos only half of it. The other half is editing and deleting late into the night. So take it away, Lauren.
Great, thanks, Dr. P. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Great, okay. Cool, thank you for the intro. All right, we're gonna switch to the next slide real quick. That was perfect. Yeah, Dr. P didn't have to convince me. Very hard to go on this trip. It's 3 of my favorite things, talking vet med, taking photos of birds, and traveling. So didn't take long to convince. I am a native of South Bay, so a lot of familiar faces here tonight, which is awesome. And for those of you who are a little late showing up, I am currently in the Caribbean, just to recap. And yeah, shout out to South Bay Wildlife Rehab. That's how I met Dr. P. And also to Marine Mammal Care Center and Madrona Marsh for really getting me into wildlife interests. All right, next slide. Cool, so Zambia as a country has a really wide biodiversity and tons of birds. It is a birder's paradise. We do not have time to go through all those birds tonight in a half hour. So I've narrowed it down to what Dr. P and I have made as notable birds. Just as like a little quick crash course. I wanted you guys to practice using your birding eyes. So the birds of Zambia are colorful and amazing, but they're not easy to find. So you got to practice looking at it. There is a bird in this photo. He's very bright orange. So even the bright ones you can barely see. This is actually the African paradise flycatcher. But even as close as I was, that was only like 10 feet away. He's pretty tiny and hard to spot. He is not one of the ones we'll talk about, but there are many cool birds. I do recommend going through them. We're going to keep it just raptors, some kingfishers, some bee eaters, and a stork. All right, next slide. We're going to start with our raptor friends. We're just going to talk about 4 of them, although there are 44 diurnal species of raptor in Zambia. I wanted to mention here, this isn't the most beautiful of photographs, but this is how you'll often see eagles in Zambia. They're going to be soaring high above you. So do take that photo. It can really help in identifying. It's a great silhouette. So you can try to see if you're looking at an eagle versus a vulture versus a hawk. You can tell a lot, even though it's not your classically beautiful photo that you want to share with your friends. All right, next slide. Cool. So this is going to be our first bird of the night. This is the African fish eagle. Scientific name Haliaeetus vocifer. They are actually the national bird of Namibia and Zambia. They are one of the about like medium eagle sizes we'll see tonight. Their wingspan is 4 to 6 feet, and they can weigh 4.5 to 8 pounds. They're very distinctive. They look a lot like our bald eagle, tiny bit smaller. And as their name suggests, they really feast on fish. They can be found throughout sub-Saharan Africa, which is super cool, and anywhere, including alkaline lakes. So anywhere where there's bodies of water, including some really odd lakes like that. They do hunt after fish, but they can also eat other things like flamingos in the alkaline lakes when fish are scarce. So they're pretty good at adapting to wherever their territory covers. Reproductive wise, they are monogamous. They'll mate for life, and they will breed around April and October in Southern Africa. And they lay about 1 to 4 eggs a clutch a year. So not that many, and only about 5% of them actually survive to make it to maturity. And their population status currently is of least concern, which is yay. Not many raptors have that. But it's great right now. They have a pretty positive perspective with local farmers because they're a good keystone raptor species, and they kind of show how good the aquatic ecosystem is doing. All right, and they can live up to about 16 to 24 years in the wild. Cool, next slide. All right, this is our most colorful raptor. This is the bottler eagle, scientific name Terathopius icadatus. They are called the bottler eagle, and it's actually like a fun play on words where it comes from. It's a French term, which actually means like tumbler. So they get this name because of the way they soar. So they kind of have this like wobbly flight pattern, almost like a person on a tightrope trying to stay on the rope, which makes it really easy to spot them from a long distance away. But also his coloring is very easy. So when you spot this guy in a tree, you're not wondering which bird it is. Their face and legs, like the most vibrant of their color, is actually like a mood ring. This guy is actually probably pretty excited to have his photo taken. So he's really vibrant red right now. But when they're pretty calm and not doing much, they'll be a paler orange color. It's kind of fun. They can't hide their feelings. Their wingspan is 5 to 6 feet, and they weigh anywhere between 4 and 5 pounds. Adults are actually more suited to lower elevation flight. They have wings that go out to a narrow point and a short tail relative to body size. So when you see that nice silhouette, they're also easy to identify. They are widely distributed throughout sub-Saharan Africa, although they prefer wide open spaces to hunt, such as woodlands, savannas, and grasslands. And they eat a wide variety of things. They can hunt like your normal eagle species, mostly terrestrial vertebrates like mammals, kind of like birds and other reptiles as well, but they're also really good scavengers, and they'll steal prey or eat carrion. They've got an advantage flying at a lower elevation. They typically get there and spot the carcass before vultures do, which is good because they're much smaller than vultures, and they don't get a long time to get those juicy tidbits before they're pushed out the way. They reach reproductive maturity between 7 to 8 years, and they nest below the canopies of trees near water, and they'll lay 1 egg per clutch a year, and their lifespan is about 27 years in the wild, and their current population status is near threatened. A lot of this is due to human impact. These guys are very slow to mature, to reproduce, and are long-lived, so they're pretty sensitive to any sort of human impact. And currently, right now, the largest one seems to be practice from local livestock farmers, where they will put pesticides into carcasses of livestock for the purposes of keeping away large predators, large terrestrial predators that would hunt on their flock. Unfortunately, it also poisons not just the lions or the hyenas, but the raptor species that scavenge as well. All right, next slide.
Okay, so now we're continuing. There we go.
Sweet, thanks. This is the Marshall eagle, scientific name Polymatus bellicosus. They are the largest eagle in Africa, and technically Zambia too. They have a wingspan of 6 feet to 8 feet, and they can weigh 6 to 13 pounds, much bigger bird. Their underparts are really bright white. So when they're sitting in this bottom photo, they can be a little indistinct from far away, but their size will give them away most of the time. Otherwise, you can look and see their really brilliant white underparts with brown to black spotting, and that follow all the way down their leg. And they typically avoid humans, so they're pretty hard to find. You'll usually see them kind of far off, either soaring above you or far in a tree. They do prefer open areas they can hunt, like savannas and scrubby woodlands. They can also be found at elevations almost up to 10,000 feet, so really away from people. They like to hunt and soar to surprise their prey. So they won't just be swooping in from a branch. They'll be looking around hunting, kind of like our hawks. They typically prey species such as hares and other mammals, but they can also eat up to like a small antelope, up to a jackal even. And they can take away about 77 pounds worth of meat in one go. They are monogamous reproducers. They reach reproductive maturity at 4 to 5 years old, and they need really high trees, or sometimes they'll use electricity pylons where you have all their cables running to. They'll lay 1 to 2 eggs per clutch about every 2 years, pretty slow, and they'll live about 14 to 25 years in the wild. Currently, these guys are near threatened to endangered all over Africa, but including in Zambia, they're mostly near threatened currently right now. And again, just like the bottler, this is mostly due to human impact. So there are a couple ones though, aside from the poisoning that farmers can do as accident. Some of them have reported seeing drownings due to attempts to drink from really steep-sided reservoirs. Sometimes you'll see electrical wire collisions, just like we get in the South Bay too sometimes. They'll also do electrocutions if they choose to make their nests on top of electricity pylons. Sometimes it doesn't work out so well. Also lack of prey due to pest extermination, so all the hares that they want. But a large part of it too, besides that accidental poisoning, is some intentional poisoning because of a misunderstanding about what these big birds eat. A lot of farmers consider them pests because they can make off with like a small ruminant or their chickens, which in a poor village is really impactful for that community. Unfortunately, poisoning the meat is probably it's not the way to go, but it is what they'll do on purpose sometimes, as well as accidentally when they try to poison off lions and other hyenas. Next slide. Okay, this one, we're going to talk about our one vulture species for the night. This is the African white-backed vulture. This is Gyps, scientific name Gyps africanus. There are about 7 vulture species in Zambia overall, all of which are either endangered or critically endangered. This guy is currently considered endangered. And you know, these guys, they get a bad rap. I don't have a super clear picture, but when I say vulture, most people think, they're ugly. Like, who cares? They're not a pretty bird. No one wants to see them. They're dirty, covered in blood. No, these guys are key. You need them. The key in the ecosystem, these guys, they do so much good for us. They get a bad rep, but they don't deserve it. They're not just ugly birds. They can do a lot, actually. I think about 100 of these guys can strip a 100-pound carcass in 3 minutes. The speed at that really helps prevent the spread of nasty, harmful pathogens that can get into the environment and even our public health. Also, not to mention like a nice, cheap and free way to do disposal of hazardous waste. Currently, didn't mention the wingspan. These guys are our biggest raptor for the night. They are 6 to 7 feet wingspan, and they weigh 9 to 16 pounds. These guys are really distinct of the 7 vulture species. They have a really dark beak and a nice white ruff and a white back, just like their name suggests. They can be found all over sub-Saharan Africa, and they prefer open savanna so they can find carcasses, and they nest in colonies. They will reproduce around 5 to 7 years of age, and they will lay 1 to 2 eggs per year. They live to be 15 to 20 years old in the wild, which is great if we had more in the wild. But unfortunately, in the last 30 years, we've seen a catastrophic decline of these guys, about 97% of all their population in the last 30 years. Main issues is that similar pesticide for carcasses that local farmers and villages are doing to prevent predation. And the biggest pesticide that's at play right now seems to be one called carbofuran or furadin, which is actually no longer legal in Europe, Canada, and of limited use in the US. So there's measures working on that. But we also see some purposeful poisoning beyond being pests. So Locals kind of think they're ugly, don't really understand their purpose, but we also see some poachers starting to take advantage of this method of getting rid of vultures. They've started noticing that wildlife rangers will use vultures to help them find carcasses from illegal poaching activity. So poachers now will leave pesticides on that carcass to kill the vultures to try to hide their crime. No insult to injury there. Currently, there's a lot of great programs starting to kick off though, the largest of which are all doing education outreach, which is fantastic. They do it at local levels and to farm management. And they're trying to encourage communities to take pride in their ecosystem and to help with conservation efforts and continued surveillance of this really cool species. All right, next slide. Cool, that ends our raptors. We're moving on to kingfishers. And in fact, 12 of the 93 species of kingfishers known in the world can be found in Zambia. We're just going to talk about 4 of them. All right, next slide. This guy's my favorite. The malachite kingfisher, scientific name Cornithornis cristatus. They're very striking, right? These guys are really obvious. You'd see them right away. No, they're tiny. These guys can be extra hard to spot. They're about 12 to 19 grams, and they are about 13 centimeters tall. So that is 2 golf ball tees put together, 2.5 of them. It's about like this big. They can be pretty tiny. Yeah, so keep your spotting eyes on. They live all throughout sub-Saharan Africa as well, and they typically inhabit freshwater systems with slow-flowing rivers and marshes. They are carnivorous, as you can see in that bottom picture. They will hunt lots and lots of fish, but they will also eat crustaceans, insects, and even frogs. And they can hunt like your typical kingfisher. When you think kingfisher, they'll pop off that perch and dive into the water. They can reach up to 24 miles an hour. It's pretty good for such a tiny bird. They are monogamous, and they will breed in September and October, and they dig burrows to nest in. And they'll lay about 3 to 6 eggs per clutch a year, and they'll live about 6 to 7 years. And their current population status is of least concern, which is great, although we are seeing some declines on some rivers where human activity is more proliferative, like the Nairobi River in Kenya. All right, next slide.
Okay. Not working.
Doesn't like it.
Stuck. Hang on here.
No worries. I'll take a sip.
There we go. All right, let's try now. There we go.
Awesome. Okay, cool. This is the pied kingfisher, scientific name Cyril rudis. Their population status right now is of least concern, and they are globally widespread and one of the most numerous kingfishers in the world. They're a medium-sized kingfisher, so they're a little bit bigger than our malachite. They can weigh anywhere between 70 to 121 grams, with females slightly larger, and their body size is about 25 to 30 centimeters. Their black and white striping is really distinctive, as well as their size. So as long as you can see them, pretty easy to identify. They live in small and large lakes, rivers, coastal lagoons, and sandy rocky coasts. They'll even use human dams, reservoirs, or roadside ditches with fresh to brackish water. They're really not picky, as long as they can eat food out of it. They are carnivore. They'll typically eat fish, but they also feast on aquatic flying insects and frogs. And they can dive straight from the perch, or they can fly out and hover, a little bit like our American kestrel there in the South Bay, and then dive into the water. They reach reproductive maturity at 1 to 2 years of age, and they will breed around February and December in Zambia. They also dig burrows for nesting, and they'll nest in pairs or family groups. And they have about, in the family groups when they do it, it's more of a colony setting, so it'll be about 20 nests, and they'll lay 1 to 7 eggs per clutch a year. And the young, they'll stay with their parents for several months. They stick around a while. And females that are born in a colony setting will not return to that natal colony. All right, next slide. Great, this is our brown-hooded kingfisher. Again, another one of our medium-sized kingfishers. Again, need those eyes. He looks bright, but it's deceiving. It's the same bird in that bottom picture, if you can see him. It's right in the middle. This is the brown-hooded kingfisher, scientific name Halcyon albiventris. They're about 22 centimeters big, and they are 48 to 58 grams, with the females being slightly larger. They have really nice bright turquoise wings, rump, and tail with a nice bright red bill, legs, and feet. They're commonly seen throughout their ranges because they're very adaptable to urban setting habitats, which is great for their population. They can live in urban, suburban settings like parks, anywhere with open space where they can catch insects. They are actually a little bit of not a misnomer. They're not really great at catching fish. It's like their least successful hunting method. They mostly eat insects, especially locusts, or invertebrates and small vertebrates like frogs and scorpions. And they will reproduce in the October to February range. They're monogamous and solitary nester. They'll burrow and they will lay 2 to 5 eggs per clutch. And they live up to about 9 years. Great, next slide. Cool, this is our last kingfisher to go over. And as his name suggests, he's very large. This is the giant kingfisher, scientific name Megaceryle maxima. Their population status is also least concern. Their body size is 42 to 49 centimeters, and they can weigh up to half a pound to a whole pound, so much bigger than our other kingfishers. Very easy to identify him based off of size, or you can look at his nice black crown with white spots on it and a really rich coppery red breast. You can kind of see in this bottom picture. Their habitat is widely dispersed throughout sub-Saharan Africa as well, except for the arid Southwest. They really prefer to have large perennial rivers nearby. Dams and lakes with plenty of marginal woody growth or rocky seashores can work. They mostly eat fish and river crabs, along with frogs, insects, and small reptiles. They've been known to catch fish up to 320 feet offshore, so they can be pretty good at getting out there and hunting. They are solitary and monogamous. They'll reproduce between January and August, and they'll burrow to nest as well, usually about 6 to 9 feet above ground level in the sides of riverbanks. They'll lay 3 to 5 eggs a year, and as soon as they fledge, they start diving within a few hours. So they're very, very good divers. All right, next slide. Cool, onto our bee eaters for the night. There are about 25 species of the Meropidia bee eater family throughout subtropical, tropical, Eurasia, Africa, and Australasia. There's a lot of these guys out there. They're pretty, but really brilliantly beautiful. The one on the left that we see is going to be our southern carmine bee eater, and the one on the right is our white-fronted bee eater, both of which we'll talk about. All right, next slide.
Yeah, so working.
Sweet. All right, this is our first one. He's also our tiniest one. This is the little bee eater, very appropriately named. Scientific name Merops pusillus, and their population size is of least concern right now. Their body size is about 16 to 17 centimeters, and they weigh only 13 to 19 grams. If the size wasn't a giveaway, they also have a nice red eyeball, if you get close enough picture, and a really broad black eye band. They live in grassy places, seldom far from water, and they have a wide variety of insects that they feast on, but mostly honeybees, hence their name. And they're pretty fierce little hunters of bees. You can see in this picture, they'll catch them on wing in flight. They'll grab this bee, and then they'll take it to the nearest flat, hard surface and smack it just to get that stinger out, and they can help themselves to a feast without worrying about the sting. And then they'll also hunt in pairs, which you can see in these photos, and they can forage up to 65 feet above the ground, but they usually stay closer to the ground. Their season of reproducing is September to October, and they'll usually make their burrow nests near a colony of other bee eater species. And they'll lay about 4 to 6 eggs a clutch per year, and they live 5 to 6 years in the wild. All right, next slide. Awesome. This is my other favorite bird. This is the white-fronted bee eater, scientific name Merops bullocoides. Population status least concern. Their body size is a bit bigger. They're 23 centimeters and they weigh 28 to 38 grams. And their scarlet throat is like most distinctive, but also their pairing of the coloring of the turquoise wings, the white chin strap, and the white forehead. Very distinctive from other bee eaters. They prefer broad-leafed to mixed woodland along perennial rivers. And in South Africa, they're mostly associated with bee-attracting exotic trees like eucalyptus trees. Pretty smart. Their diet mostly is bees, but they'll also eat wasps, beetles, and sawflies. They can also make, instead of just the hawking gesture where they'll fly out and chase after the bee, they can slow down and glide and hover before seizing an insect as well. They reproduce around August to September in Zambia, and they'll live in a colony site throughout the year. So they're essentially monogamous within that colony, but they'll have helpers living with them, either a son that's not reproducing, that was part of a previous clutch, or an unattached male that's not trying to reproduce with the pair. This is pretty cool because there's a lot of birds that will try to lay parasitic eggs in these nests, and having a communal aspect to watch these tunnels really makes sure that no eggs get put in. They'll just push out any egg that's not recognized. So at any time, these nests are never left alone. Pretty good neighbors. A typical colony will have 10 to 20 nests, attended by about 30 to 60 birds. And they can lay a clutch of about 2 to 5 eggs a year, and they live 5 to 7 years in the wild. Next slide. Cool, this is our last bee eater. This is the southern carmine bee eater, scientific name Merops nubicoides. Their population status is least concern. Body size 24 to 27 centimeters. Body weight about 44 to 66 grams. And these are our only migratory species of bee eater that we'll mention tonight. They'll spend the breeding season in Zambia between August and November. And then they'll leave to South Africa for summer months. Sorry, Southern Africa for the summer months. They'll reproduce in really large, dense colonies, usually with hundreds, but sometimes thousands of nests. And they'll also burrow to nest like our other bee eaters. But these guys are big preparers. They'll make their nests 4 to 5 months in advance to using them, and then continue to reuse them for decades. So really great for birders. It's really easy to know when these guys are going to be there. Sometimes they can shift their burrow sites from about like 100 meters or so, but not much variance there. They'll lay about 2 to 3 eggs per clutch a year, and then they'll eat a variety of insects, but mostly the bees. They've also been known to use ground-dwelling birds or large mammals such as elephants to flush out insects. So again, they like to be smart hunters. They'll wait, and 80% of their diet is honeybees in the Zambia region. And they'll live for about 7 years in the wild. Next slide. Great, coming from working at Madrona Marsh, I love wading birds. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through a whole bunch, so we picked one of the coolest ones, the marabou stork. Next slide, perfect. This is the marabou stork, scientific name Leptotylus craminifer. Their population status is of least concern right now, and their wingspan is larger than the other birds we were just talking about. They're about 7 to 9 feet, and they weigh anywhere from 8 to 19 pounds, with males a little bit larger on average. They have a very distinct yellow bill, as you can see in these pictures, a really pink neck and head with gray legs and dark upper body with brilliant white underparts. They prefer open, dry savanna, grasslands, swamps, riverbanks, shores, and receding pools. They're really not that picky, just anywhere that's not a dense forest or desert. You'll frequently see them near human habitations, often around fishing villages, slaughterhouses, or rubbish dumps. Although where we were in the more southern part of Africa, they tend to be in less human populated areas. I like to call them opportunistic specialists with their diets because they will eat anything a lot of times. They'll scavenge and hunt. A lot of the carrion and they'll eat will be like rubbish discarded by humans or even scraps of fish. Although looking at their bill, you'd be like, oh, how does it get the meat? You'd be correct in being confused. They are not a raptor. They can't exactly pick apart meat. They will wait for vultures to do it for them and then eat the scraps. They can also catch a wide variety of vertebrates and invertebrates, like fish, termites, frogs, and lizards. They can also hunt like a heron, so they'll wade around and snap at a fish, or they'll leave their beak partially open and then snap a fish when it comes by. They reproduce around 4 years old, and they're colony nesters. Usually 20 to 60 pairs are typical, but can be up to several thousands of pairs at a time. And this is considering only 20% of the population actually breeds in any 1 year. So pretty impressive. Nests are built in trees and cliffs, usually about 32 to 100 feet off the ground. 2 to 3 eggs per clutch. And they can age usually around 25 years in the wild, but it's been recorded up to 41 years in captivity. And next slide. Great, and that's all the birds I had to bring you tonight. I did want to mention my favorite birding book for this trip was this one. If you are not into having drawings depict for you for identifying birds, maybe don't use this one, but this one has a great inner flap that quickly shows you all the images of the most common birds and colorful birds that you'll see. So really helpful if you're really new to birds of Southern Africa like I was. And these are all my references for you guys. Big shout out to eBird. And thank you all for listening. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. And thanks Audubon for getting us together. I'm gonna hand this back over to Dr. P.
Thank you, Lauren. Good job then. So there's much more information we want to share with you. If you come on the website for the Long Beach Animal Hospital, that's lbah.com, and you can see here where it is. If you go in the general section and come down to current news, you're going to see piping plovers. Come to services, go to the wildlife care, see much more about what I showed you about wildlife care. And the photography section has got all kinds of trips on birds. You'll see penguins from the Falkland Islands. You'll see me eating breakfast with the black-browed albatross, my Jozo's. There's a beautiful adult albatross, okay? You'll see the Magellanic penguins looking at the reflection in my camera. You'll see trips with nomads of Mongolia with the golden eagles in the summer, then the wintertime. You'll see Galapagos with the frigate birds. You'll see a beautiful bird like this. Anybody know what this is? This is a tawny eagle chasing away a Nubian vulture, also called a lapid-faced vulture from its nest. It's a fantastic photograph taken by one of my students on one of my trips. Michigan, where I'm from, is a birders mecca. Okay, this is in the morning. It's just bird sounds like crazy when you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And you can even hear some people like Steve calling some turkeys for you. So we have all kinds of people to help out. Lauren came to visit one time, one spring. It was a little cool weather looking for eagles, and we found them. This is Daddy-O bringing his lake trout to his chicks first thing in the morning. This is the nest he brings them to. There's Lake Michigan, where he flies every morning, sometimes twice a day over this lake to bring his lake trout to his chicks. And there's a couple of the chicks laying inside that nest right now. If you want to learn more about it, I got a whole series of articles I wrote for a journal on what it takes to find these eagles. It's a 5-part series each month called As the Eagle Turns. I can send it to you if you like. Okay. Another part of Michigan, it's got the Mackinac Straits Raptor Watch, where they banned all kinds of birds like this. Okay, raptors as they go through a flyway. I have sponsored one bird with the tag on it, and it flew from this area of Michigan all the way up into Canada. So they track them. They're very sophisticated. There's also the Whitefish Point Bird Observatory. It's one of the best spots in Michigan. There's also Kirtland Warbers in Michigan too. So all these things are all in the area, including the piping plovers, where I spent some time with biologists. And here's a little baby piping plover that's being tagged. So all these spots, my condo in northern Michigan is right here. Kirtland Warbers, all the eagles I showed you around here. Mackinac Straits Raptor Watch here, where they fly into Canada. Piping plovers out here in Lake Michigan. And the Whitefish Point Bird Observatory, where they fly up Lake Superior into Canada, and also Simi Wildlife Refuge, 95,000 acres. That's the end of our presentation. So if anybody wants to learn about some of these things more on these trips, we just came back from Africa working with black rhinos. And in this part of Africa, Africa's got tons and tons of wildlife. Immature fish eagle, a lilac-breasted roller, pale chanting goshawk, Goliath heron eating a fish, okay, swallowing a fish. And that's the end of our presentation. So hopefully we kind of went a little fast, but gave you some insight as to many things you can do around the world. And especially if you can't travel the world and see things like in Africa, what are places like Michigan or Wisconsin or Minnesota, because they're birding meccas. Okay, any questions from anybody? We kind of went faster. I covered it all in 1 hour.
Well, that was great, Dr. P and Lauren. Thank you very much. So if there are any questions, you can unmute yourselves and ask away. And there was one comment in the chat. Thank you for all you both do and a wonderful presentation. And why are bee eaters so colorful?
Oh, good question. I didn't actually ever come across that in my studies. I'm gonna look that up. Oh, and I do see another question. Sorry, Jan, I don't know. I don't know why bee eaters are that colorful. I would guess it's a reproductive advantage. So part of their mating ritual probably. Do you know, Dr. P?
No, I don't. Ask nature on that one, okay? Why do zebras have stripes? Okay, good question. Okay, here's the one about the great horned owl. Yes, it would have been. So probably what would have happened was the rehabbers probably would have kept that for a teaching bird because they probably wouldn't be able to hunt at all with one lens being gone like that. Those birds live on the margin. They're on the edge of all the time. They have to be 100% functional to be able to survive in nature. So that eye being the way it was, it probably would never hunt. But it could fly around in a cage. It could be used as a teaching tool. It could be used in a zoo. So it could probably do okay, but it wouldn't be able to probably hunt on its own in the wild.
And excellent presentation, Lauren from Herb.
Right. Okay. Thank you for showing up, everybody. Everybody want to go to Africa now? Everybody want to go to Africa now?
Yay!
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation from both of you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, both of you.
Very enjoyable.
Hopefully you learned a lot. A lot of information to share with you, wasn't there?
Yeah,
Good.
wonderful, wonderful pictures too.
Well, my email's on the beginning of the presentation. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a call. Okay.
We did have one question really quick. Dr.
Okay.
P, are you donating your time to the wildlife surgery?
Oh, yeah. So when you say that question, I go back to the Long Beach Animal Hospital. I sold it a couple of years ago to my staff, but I still go there. I'm going there Friday to see some clients and do things. And yes, anytime there's wildlife there, and especially when there's students, these are the senior vet students as part of the externship program. They come there. So when they're there, I give them a lot of my time. And if there's wildlife for surgery, we do it together. And yes, I still do some of that.
That's great.
Great. That was outstanding. This is Jan. That was outstanding. Thank you both. Really, really enjoyed that. That was very, very interesting. Thank you.
It's too bad we can only do it on Zoom because if we do it in person, it's got so much more, I should say, ambiance to it, you know? We can tell our jokes better and all those things, and we can even show more, but it worked out okay. I'm glad.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. That's true. In person is better, but thank you. Thank you that we have Zoom so we can, do something.
We can get together.
Yeah.
So did anybody get grossed out on the surgery pictures? I took the bloody ones out, you know, they didn't do that, were they?
No, they were great.
So we got bloody ones if you want to see those someday. I gave you a warning. Okay, so that was good. Okay, Lauren's got to get going. She's got something to do. It's 11 o'clock for her though, so I can
I
stay.
do. I've got a ride waiting. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.